Have you ever heard the story of kings who died just a few days after taking the throne? A secret order that was suddenly destroyed, and a curse that shook history? The story of the Capetian dynasty, the Knights Templar, and a war that built the identity of a nation. A tale full of betrayal, power, curses, and war that forever changed the borders of Europe. If you think the Middle Ages were just about handsome knights and big castles, you're seriously mistaken. Come with us to discover the hidden secrets behind crowns and the curses that brought down kings. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, something big happened. The region of Gaul, modern-day France, was taken over by the Germanic tribe of the Franks. In the year 800 AD, Charlemagne, the legendary ruler of the Middle Ages, founded the Carolingian Empire and declared, "I am the heir of the Western Roman Empire." But this unity didn't last long. In the year 843, the Treaty of Verdun exploded like a bomb and split the empire into three parts. Eastern Francia, which later became Germany. Middle Francia, which only lasted 12 years. And Western Francia, which became our France. This was the official beginning of French history. That same year, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. A treaty that limited the king's power and guaranteed the rights of nobles and the church. In other words, the king could no longer do whatever he wanted. 2 years later, another shock. Ragnar Lothbrok and his fierce Vikings came with 120 ships and laid siege to Paris, looted the city, and received 2,570 kilograms of gold and silver as ransom from Charles the Bald. Yes, the Vikings were the kings of plunder during that time. In the second half of the 9th century, 3 more treaties were signed that defined the borders of Eastern and Western Francia. Borders that remained mostly unchanged until the end of the Middle Ages. But the story didn't end there. Just 5 years later, the Vikings returned with an army of about 30 to 40,000 men to besiege Paris again. This time, the defense was led by Count Otto, who only had a few hundred warriors. And this is where a great war began. A war that changed the fate of France forever. In the autumn of 885 AD, the Vikings launched a major attack on Paris. But the strong city walls and the bravery of the defenders prevented them from entering. The siege continued until early 886, when most of the Viking forces moved upstream along the Seine to plunder other towns. Those who remained made one final attempt in the summer to capture Paris, but failed again. That same autumn, Charles the Fat arrived with his army, but instead of fighting, he made a strange decision. He allowed the Vikings to continue their route toward Burgundy, where a rebellion had broken out. Charles the Fat promised to give them 257 kilograms of silver, and the Vikings left. Later, Count Otto didn't allow them to return, and they were forced to carry their ships overland to reach the Marne River. This Viking failure increased the importance of Paris, turning it into one of the most strategic cities of that time. But Charles the Fat soon lost his power in 887 and died the following year. After that, Otto from the Robertian dynasty became king. A powerful family that always had a role in French politics. During Otto's reign, the complete separation between West and East Francia occurred. One of the Viking leaders during the siege of Paris was Rollo, who attacked again 25 years later. After failing to capture Chartres, Rollo signed a treaty, converted to Christianity, and pledged to defend the king of West Francia. In return, Charles the Simple gave him the region of Rouen, marking the beginning of the Duchy of Normandy. A region that later played a major role in European history. The last Carolingian king of France, Louis the Lazy, died without an heir. His uncle Charles was the natural candidate, but the nobles chose a more distant relative who was still a descendant of Charlemagne. And so, the Capetian dynasty came to power, with Hugh Capet, the son of a powerful Frankish duke and count of Paris, who was also the grandson of the German emperor's sister. The Capetians are one of the oldest and largest royal dynasties in Europe, ruling France until the 14th century. Many European royal families are in some way descended from the Capetians. Hugh Capet was the first king to abandon the Germanic language and choose Old French instead. Paris became the official capital of France, its largest and wealthiest city. The currency at the time was the Parisian livre, which later changed to the livre tournois. At that time, France was a feudal monarchy, closely tied to the Catholic Church and the Pope. But great challenges lay ahead. In 1066, William, Duke of Normandy and descendant of Rollo, invaded England. At the decisive Battle of Hastings, the last Anglo-Saxon king was killed, and the Normans ruled England for the next 70 years. After the conquest of England by William the Conqueror, Normandy became one of the hottest points of rivalry between France and England. William remained Duke of Normandy and also became King of England, turning into a serious rival for the French crown. From 1096, French nobles played a key role in the Crusades, wars launched to reclaim Jerusalem and the Holy Land from the Muslims. Who was the first leader of the French Crusaders? Hugh, Count of Vermandois. The younger brother of Philip I the Amorous and son of Anna Yaroslavna, a Russian princess from the powerful Rurikid dynasty. After the First Crusade, the French managed to establish several Crusader states in the Near East, such as the Kingdom of Jerusalem, ruled by Godfrey of Bouillon. The County of Edessa, initially governed by Godfrey's younger brother Baldwin of Bouillon, who later became King of Jerusalem. And the County of Tripoli, ruled by Raymond of Toulouse. But the story of the French nobles in the Crusades didn't end there. When young Louis VII ruled and became one of the leaders of the Second Crusade, the University of Paris was founded in 1150. This university, which emerged from the cathedral school, is considered the second oldest university in Europe. Great minds like Albert the Great from Germany, Thomas Aquinas from Italy, and Roger Bacon from England studied there, and the University of Paris became one of the most important centers of learning in the Middle Ages. Now let's talk about the Notre-Dame Cathedral. A building whose construction began in 1163, when Louis VII gave permission to Bishop Maurice de Sully. This cathedral is a masterpiece of French Gothic architecture, and its construction lasted until the mid-14th century. Today, Notre Dame is one of the main symbols of France in Paris. It was the site of Napoleon's coronation and became globally famous thanks to the novel The Hunchback of Notre Dame. In 1190, Philip II Augustus, who joined other European kings in the Third Crusade, became the first king of France to abandon the title King of the Franks and officially call himself King of France. He fought many battles against Richard the Lionheart, the King of England. After Richard's death, he invaded Normandy and brought the region back under French control. During his reign, the famous defensive wall of Paris, the Wall of Philip Augustus, was built, and the University of Paris received its official charter from Pope Innocent III. One of Philip II's great descendants was Louis IX, known as St. Louis. A king who ruled for nearly half a century, implemented major legal reforms, and ended the Albigensian Crusades. These wars, launched under the order of his father Philip II and led by Simon de Montfort, resulted in the defeat of the Cathar religious movement and expanded the royal domain in southern France. In this bloody conflict, between 200,000 to 1 million Cathars were killed. Some historians consider this war a form of religious genocide. Raphael Lemkin, the Jewish legal scholar who coined the term genocide, identified the Albigensian Crusade as one of the historical examples of crimes against humanity. Well friends, the story of the Capetian dynasty and the Knights Templar was full of twists and turns. This dynasty had massive debts to the Templars and decided to seize their wealth and power. After the Crusades, the Catholic Church no longer needed these influential warrior monks. The Templars, a military religious order that had become one of the richest bankers of the Middle Ages, woke up one morning to find the King of France had ordered their arrest. torture, interrogation, and finally, in 1312, Pope Clement V announced that the order must be dissolved. The last Grand Master of the Templars, Jacques de Molay, refused to confess under torture, and instead of a normal execution, he was burned alive in the middle of the Seine River, right in front of Notre-Dame Cathedral. This shocking scene gave rise to the legend of the Templar curse. It is said that Jacques de Molay, at the moment of his death, cursed Pope Clement, King Philip IV, and his entire dynasty. And it's not hard to believe, both the Pope and the King died within a year of Molay's execution, the Pope from illness, and the King from a stroke during a hunting trip. This legend later inspired the famous historical novels The Accursed Kings. But the Capetian story didn't end with Philip IV. There followed 14 years of chaos, with kings from this dynasty rising and falling one after another. For example, John I, Philip IV's grandson, became king the moment he was born, but only lived for 4 days. His death might not have been accidental and was possibly murder. The last Capetian king, Charles IV the Handsome, struggled with revolts in Flanders, and when he died without an heir, the royal dynasty changed. After that, Philip VI of the House of Valois ascended the throne, and this is where the famous and lengthy 100 Years' War began. The war started because the King of England, Edward III, was the closest relative of Charles IV and had a legitimate claim to the French crown. But the French nobility declared their support for Philip VI of Valois. At first, Edward accepted it, but then thought, why shouldn't I take it, and declared himself the rightful heir to the French throne. Thus began a war that changed France forever. During this war, the French realized who they were, not just enemies of the English, but a real nation with a distinct identity. This war marked the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the modern era, transforming France from a feudal monarchy into a centralized state where the king held absolute power and, instead of relying on peasants, used paid soldiers.